Hey there. We are now a couple of days into doing some of these check-ins, and let me tell you, it has been great being able to see and talk with a lot of you. It's been awesome. Couple of things to remember: make sure you are checking the updates in Schoology. I'll normally put an update every day that just kind of gives you a rundown of what's going on for the day, in addition to just some kind of extra things, not just posting the actual lesson for the day. So today we're doing sort of a day 2 of solving by square roots. So it's not a brand new lesson, it's building off of what we did the other day. And there are 2 things posted, day 2 opener and then just day 2. I'm going to walk you through those 2 right now. Then there's a day 2 practice. That'll be for you to do on your own. I will post the answer key to go with that. And then there'll be a homework number 2 to be submitted. So if you're understanding all of it, you might be able to skip to the homework. If you need the more practice, then you have that extra practice posted. So if we take a look at the day 2 opener, solving each quadratic, the difficult part is knowing how to go about it, because they all kind of look different, but we're trying to get the x all by itself in all of these. So if we look at number 1, I'm thinking to get that x squared by itself, we want to add the 1 to both sides. So we're getting 3x squared equals 108. So since it's 3 times x squared, divide both sides by 3, and we're left with x squared equals 36. In order to then find out what x equals, we square root it. And when we square root it, remember, you get 2 solutions. You get a positive root and a negative root. So the square root of 36 is 6. So we're getting x equals plus or minus 6. Or if you wanted to write it as x equals 6, x equals negative 6. Either one of those works. So plus or minus 6 means that bottom answer. If we look at the next one, I don't want to add that 9 because it's lumped in parentheses. The whole thing is being squared. So on this one, you have to square root right away. And we're getting a plus and a minus. So then the square root of something squared just leaves you with what you had, and that was that x minus 9. Square root of 100 is 10, so you're getting plus or minus 10. I think it's probably easiest to understand it by writing this out as 2 separate equations then. You get x minus 9 equals a plus 10, and x minus 9 equals negative 10. So instead of trying to do it all kind of at once with a plus and a minus, write it as 2 separate ones. So then over here, you would add 9 to both sides. Same thing on this equation when you get there. So on the left, 10 plus 9 gives you my favorite of 19. And then negative 10 plus 9 gives you negative 1. So you're getting answer of x equals 19 and x equals negative 1. When we go to something like number 3, it's almost the same, but you notice there's that 1/4 out in front. We can't square root it yet. We have to get rid of that 1/4. So we can divide by 1/4, and dividing by a fraction is the same as multiplying by the reciprocal. So the reciprocal of 1/4 is 4/1. Because what you get right here is 4/4, which is 1. Cancels out. So now we have x plus 2 squared equals, and then 16 times 4/1 is 64. Now it looks like the last problem. Square root both sides. You get a plus and a minus. So you're getting x plus 2 equals plus or minus 8. Probably easiest to write that as two separate equations. X plus 2 equals a positive 8. X plus 2 equals a negative 8. Solving by subtracting the 2 from both sides, we're getting x equals 6 and x equals negative 10. So different types of problems, but solving it the same way. Then we get to something like number 4. Now there's not just an x squared, there's an x also. So when that's the case, you want to factor. So that's that whole diamond method that we just took the assessment on. So 3 times the negative 2 is the number that goes right there. And then negative 1 is the number in the middle, so that goes on the bottom. So two numbers that multiply together to be negative 6 that add up to be negative 1. Negative 3, positive 2. Because it's a 3x squared there, we're going to write it over 3x. One or both of them can reduce. In this case, it's just this one. That reduces to negative 1 over 1x. So if you kind of turn it on its side, that gives you your factors. So you have a 1x minus 1. And then you have a 3x and a positive 2. Now this whole thing was equal to 0, so it has to be equal to 0 still. The zero product property says if you have two things that multiply together to be 0, then at least one of them have to be 0. So we set x minus 1 equal to 0, and we set 3x plus 2 equal to 0. We go ahead and solve each of those. Add 1 to both sides. So you're getting x equals 1. Over here, it's a couple extra steps. You're going to subtract 2. So you're getting 3x equals negative 2. And then since it's 3 times x, we're dividing by 3. And I'm okay with you keeping that as a fraction. Negative 2/3, or it would have been negative 0.66 repeating. Now, if you think back to the assessment we just took, when we did that on the graphing problem, we were finding the x-intercepts. That's what we're doing here. When we're solving for x, we're finding the x-intercept. So that's something to keep in mind. If we look at that next set of problems that just said day 2, I'm going to just kind of quickly give some helpful hints on this. So with this first one, since it's the whole thing squared, you would square root both sides and then write that into two equations. You end up getting two answers of x equals 6, x equals negative 8. So make sure you actually do the work to see if that checks out. On number 2, your first step would be you'd want to subtract the 35 from both sides before square rooting. And for that one, let's actually do that one together. So you get x squared on the left. 10 minus 35 is negative 25. So then you're thinking square root both sides. You get a plus and minus. What I want you to look at is a negative inside the radical, inside the square root. That's actually an imaginary solution. We don't know how to do that yet. So for us, when you're taking the square root of a negative number, your answer is no real solutions. Now, if you want your mind blown, what x ends up being is a plus and minus 5i, an imaginary number. But we don't know anything about that yet. So no real solutions. When we look at number 3, that's already factored for us. So what you want to do is set each of these equal to 0 and solve like we had done on those earlier equations. You end up getting a final answer of x equals 3/5 and x equals negative 3/5. So make sure you try and complete that. And then number 4, that's going to be the whole diamond problem. You're looking at two numbers that multiply to be 6, that add up to be 7. And when you set those equal to 0 after solving, you end up getting x to be negative 6 and x to be negative 1. So hopefully that helps. Hit me up with any questions that you might have. Doesn't matter when. I'm pretty good at responding. Take a look at that other practice one for more work and submit that homework. Let's get those grades up.